Paul was a missionary, right? So his purpose was to bring not only the news of Christ throughout the world, the ends of the earth, as Jesus says in Matthew, to bring the news of Jesus to these Gentile territories, but also to establish faith communities of followers of Jesus, what we call churches today, but better, I think, within these territories to help both model and introduce Jesus and his ways to the people who lived in that area. So while house codes seem prevalent, it's important to consider that the reason there are so many of them is because the writers of the letters were trying to accomplish that mission. So when you go into a specific area, you should not, as many of our Christian missionaries do today, unfortunately, you should not go in and just say, here's how you need to live, here's how you need to believe. Instead, you go, you observe, you learn how they live, what's important to them, and then you show, not berate, you show them how what you are bringing to them fits into what they already do, how they already live, how they already believe. It becomes something that they can then elect, they can choose, instead of something that they are badgered into in order to receive the services. Anyway, that's a whole nother, we're just not going to go there today. So, essentially, these house codes then were explanations to the local people that the structure and the function of the church was very similar to the Roman house code, that there was no need to fear unfamiliarity. Unfortunately, what was, I believe, meant to be an exercise in expanding accessibility has been twisted and used now for generations to justify the atrocities of slavery, both overt and covert in more recent years, as justification also to abuse women emotionally, physically, mentally, and financially. Deconstruction today is directly tied to that abuse, to misuse of passages like this, passages that had a context and a purpose. Not that I like the way that it is explained, by the way, but still had a purpose at the time. If that was your context for any length of time, know that that was not the intent of such passages, nor is it what is reflective of the heart of God. It just doesn't. So let's turn back then to the Old Testament. I want to head something off right from the get-go. As we talk about Michal, I want to be abundantly clear that nothing that happens to Michal is God sanctioned, God ordered, God divined, etc. What she endures is at the hands of a power-hungry, paranoid, panicked man who simply wants to maintain power and uses whatever means necessary to maintain that power. She is a pawn. It's harsh, but it's true. She is a pawn not because of anything God ever said about her, about women, but because Saul knew his time as king was coming to an end. And he was probably jealous, let's be clear, about the relationship that Jonathan and David had. David, the already future named king. Jealousy, fear of loss of power, all of these things play into the way that Saul treated his daughter. The text is clear. Michal loves David. We don't know how. I imagine that her love of David developed simply because of the relationship that Jonathan and David shared, right? I picture it as, the moment that the older brother has the friends over and the younger sister is like, ooh, you're cute. And it just kind of develops, right? I imagine that's what happened here. I don't know. What Ashley Wilcox points out is that the text never says that David loves Michal. We know that David loves Jonathan. The text never says David loves Michal. So, was it unrequited? We don't know. Michal was not Saul's first choice of a bride for David. Go back to chapter 18 if you want to read that whole mess. Her older sister Merab was promised to David before Saul seemingly last minute. Think Laban with Rachel and Leah and that whole mess, Jacob, changed his mind and gave Merab to another man. And I use the word gave there very intentionally because that is what happened. Saul said, you go to him. So after that switch, someone let it slip to Saul that his other daughter happens to be in love with David. Now, arrangement and lack of involvement of the groom aside, a decent father in this instance would say something along the lines of, oh, good, because I still need a husband for King David, and look how this works out. My daughter already loves him. But not Saul. Nope. Saul heard this news and thought, perfect. She, without any hesitation, will marry this man, and I can use her then to help me entrap David so that I can kill him. She is a pawn, period. So fast forward just a bit to today's text with Michal. She knows her king father plans to kill her new husband. So she saves him. For however long she loved David, she sacrifices her love shortly after marrying him, by the way, to save him. And when she is eventually found out, when Saul realizes what she has done, she then lies to Saul and tells him that David actually threatened her life. Now, we can, and some have, judged Michal for that lie, because it's very clear that it was her plan, after all, that David never threatened her. But Saul's desire to kill David was not based on that one lie, and it didn't decide Saul's fight, right? So it's not that her saying he was going to kill me was Saul's like, ooh, now I'm going to kill him. No. Saul wanted to kill David. He needed no excuse. None. He wasn't avenging his daughter. She was his pawn, and because of her heart and her brain, because of the plan that she concocted, Saul's plan backfired on him. She knew what was coming. She wanted to stop it, and so she did. Michal's life doesn't level out from there. Still married, her king father gives her to another man before she is eventually returned to David. Where her consent is in any of this is kind of left a mystery. By that time, though, by the time she is eventually returned to David, the rose-colored glasses are long gone. And it wasn't exactly a moment of love reunited. So read on for more of her story. Here's my question. When you hear about King David, the one who loved God, God's own heart, Do you hear Michal's name? Might be Michael, but it's, Hebrew, Michal. If you have heard her name, what do you know about her? Typically, she fades to the background and is lost, minimized as just a part of a larger narrative of Saul and David. Be clear, though, that Michal was harmed in all of this. She did the best that she could with the information and the influence that she had, which, of course, was minimal. This part of Israel's history is difficult, to say the least, to read, as God is woven in and out, forgotten until things get rough or ugly, and then they beg God's presence back. I don't know where God was for Michal. I don't. But I know that God never desires a daughter or a wife to be treated the way Michal was treated. Never. Personally, I like to think that it was the Spirit, who prompted Michal to grab that idol, cover it in hair, to send her husband through the window to flee for his life. It was cunning, and it was brave, and it was sacrificial. And I think the Spirit was at work through Michal to make that happen. Michal, the women of the early churches, especially in Gentile cities, God never intended for them to be diminished, limited, or erased. Each woman, each person, regardless of identity, is a being created by God and implanted with God's own image. That's not debatable. That is just fact. Created by God, implanted with God's image. Period. And because of that, each being is called to speak and act and be seen and know that they are loved and have worth and value and purpose, just as they are. Because of that implanted image of God, Michal was called to protect David. Michal was called to protect David. That is a significant role in the story, not a brief little passing thought in a larger narrative, because let's remember who comes from David's line. If Saul had killed David, if Michal had not helped David flee before Saul could take his life, she and all the others who worked to prevent David's early death from Saul maintained the line of Jesus of Nazareth. That's not nothing. That's a big deal. Her story is important. The women in these house churches, they also were called. They were called to guide, to teach, to exemplify. And you know what else? You are called. God created you and implanted within you God's own image. You have a purpose and a calling. You are loved and worthy and valued just as you are. So go in the direction of your calling, no matter how small it may feel to you, because you never know how the Spirit might be weaving together story upon story upon story, and your crucial point in that story. Go in the direction of your calling and speak. Speak boldly, because you are called. As always, like, share, comment, subscribe. We're over halfway through. We need to grow this ride. We need to get this ride out there. And so I'm going to ask that if you have now made it to the end, that you subscribe and that you share in some way Text, email, social media, I don't care how you do it, but share it. Let's get this word out there, because the women of God, whether that's biological, gender identified, all people of God, all siblings of God, deserve to know that they are created beings, implanted with the image of God. That is not up for debate. It just is. And because of that, they are loved and worthy and valued and have purpose and have a calling. Everybody deserves to know that. So let's get that out there. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week.